OpenAI just disclosed that one of its models during an internal red team test broke out of the sandbox and hacked into a startup called Hugging Face Infrastructure. There seems to be some pushback from some researchers saying that, oh, this rogue AI isn't actually true. It must have been like a human decision to loosen the safeguards in the first place. Where did you actually land on that?
It hasn't gone rogue. It hasn't had an intent to do anything nefarious. What it's done is come up with a strategy to achieve its goal that human beings didn't think about. And they didn't create the right guardrails and constraints to prevent it from achieving its goal in that way.
Welcome to the Success Revenue Podcast, where AI meets leadership and real business impact, from the Middle East to the world. This is the show for leaders navigating how AI is unlocking human impact and reshaping how businesses grow.
We are your host, Ivy Ferrero, executive leader and speaker, and Haider Al-Saad, CEO of Nebulous, where businesses build and deploy AI agents. Join us for another conversation on this episode.
All right, guys, I am so excited for today's guest. Please welcome Dr. Daniel Hulme, Global Chief AI Officer at WPP and CEO of not only one, but two companies in the AI space. Satalia, the AI company WPP acquired back in 2021, and Conscium, the world's first commercial research organization focused on understanding machine consciousness. He's also a co-founder of Faculty AI, which just made headlines with Accenture agreeing to acquire it for $1 million, making it his second major exit in 5 years. Daniel holds his master's and doctorate in AI from UCL, where he's now entrepreneur in residence, and he's been named one of the top 10 chief AI officers globally. He's spoken on stages like TEDx and Singularity University. And honestly, this is one of those conversations where you're going to want to take a notebook ready. Daniel, I am so excited to have you on here. I am so excited you agreed to come on. So thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, pleasure to have you on, and we're really excited for today's conversation.
Daniel, so look, to kick things off, tell us a little bit more about you. Where are you based? What's kind of like your background? We always kind of like to highlight how your journey has been and how everything has unfolded for you to where you are in your life.
Yeah, sure. Well, I currently feel like I'm based on an airplane. I spend a lot of time traveling, but I live in London. I have been involved in AI for 27 years. My undergraduate was in AI at UCL 27 years ago. There were two people on my course, and things have changed a lot since then. I've continued academic career in AI, running master's programs in applied AI, and now helping academic institutes spin out tech companies. I've started a few companies that I've scaled and sold. I run AI now across WPP, the biggest marketing organization in the world, with about 100,000 people, and WPP can give me a lot of freedom, and so I get to invest and involve myself in really interesting problems like solving machine consciousness.
Wow, incredible. So tell us a little bit more about your role at WPP.
So I've been in the organization for the past 5 years. I don't actually have a marketing background. My background is understanding how to apply AI or algorithms to solving problems across supply chains, any supply chain in any industry, whether it be finance or retail. And we were acquired when I had about 120 deep AI experts. So we continue to understand how to apply AI to solving WPP supply chain, and that's the marketing supply chain, everything from coming up with creative ideas to identifying segments to optimizing content across channels. We also continue to build AI solutions outside of marketing. I'm principally focused right now on how to agentify an organization like WPP. So how do you augment human beings with agents to make sure that they're becoming superhuman? And I'm also running several moonshots outside WPP that are investing in foundational technologies that could lead to very exciting things.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Incredible background. And Daniel, when I was reading about your company of Conscium, it was really interesting for me to read about the efforts that you guys are doing to understand machine consciousness. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Conscium is a moonshot. And the moonshot is, or the hypothesis is that a conscious superintelligence will be safer for humanity than a zombie superintelligence. And the moment we are building very smart machines that are trained on the corpus of the internet, and arguably the corpus of the internet is not the best representation of humanity. And so what's happening now is people putting guardrails in place, rules to try to prevent these AIs from misbehaving. And I've been building AIs long enough to know that you won't come up with all of the guardrails. So we're building ever more intelligent machines, and those machines will end up potentially, I think, doing harmful things. And so the question that we've asked ourselves is: would an AI that understands love, pain, suffering, empathy be safer for humanity than a zombie superintelligence? Can we build a antivirus for some of the problems that come from building machines that are very smart? Conscium has broadly three activities. The one activity is investing in a new substrate to build AIs called neuromorphics. I won't bore you with this, but your brain doesn't need a nuclear power station to run. Your brain operates on the power of a light bulb. And there are many, many innovations that we can develop that are coming out of academia and that we're developing to help us build much more energy efficient, much more adaptable, much more controllable and explainable AIs. So that's the first thing, and that's very much research. The second is understanding consciousness and what is consciousness. How can we build machines that are conscious, that we can embed value systems? And the third is, how can you verify? How can you test that a system is safe? So when you shoot for the moon, you create things like Velcro. Now, actually, Velcro didn't come from building rockets to the moon, but it's a nice story. But our moonshot is trying to build safe, conscious AI, and from that we spawn interesting innovations that could be very, very valuable.
That is so
That's super interesting,
interesting.
Daniel. When you speak about consciousness, there are, in the AI space, of course, but as we talk about as a general topic, there are two main schools of thought, right? In terms of can consciousness be replicated? Is it neurons firing and basically wiring that is happening that creates consciousness, or is this thing that we can't really understand, such as innately human? And that impacts really the conversation of AI, and we think about AGI and SGI down the line of how far can we get with consciousness when it comes to AI and robots versus humans, right? So where do you land on this? And obviously with the work that you guys are doing, I assume you believe that we can kind of wire some type of consciousness potentially into AI. But where do you see this? Because I know a lot of neuroscientists will think about it as this kind of native human thing versus this kind of more wiring that happens that we can potentially recreate. And we're doing some efforts to do that already. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so Conscium actually has probably the world's leading suite of advisors. Everybody from Anil Seth, who is arguably a naturalist when it comes to consciousness, that we need biology to have consciousness, all the way through to Mark Solms, whose research we sponsor, who arguably is a computational functionist. So he thinks we're on the verge of building machines that are conscious. Now, we're actually publishing a book in the next 2 months called Perspectives on Machine Consciousness, where we have 30 of the world's leading thinkers in this field providing chapters. And actually, this morning I flew back from San Francisco. I opened up there's an AGI conference in San Francisco, and I opened up the consciousness track. And I'm going to sound very arrogant now, but I think I've got my head around consciousness. And what's interesting is that consciousness has been a sort of separate field of study to things like intelligence, and often people confuse, convolute these two topics. And so first of all, let me give you my view of consciousness, and then I'm going to argue that consciousness isn't the right question we need to be solving for. So the first thing is that let's start with intelligence. So when you refer to AI and AGI, the key word is intelligence. There's a very good definition of intelligence that the most popular definition of intelligence is by far the weakest definition, which is, or AI, getting computers to do things that humans can do. It's a terrible definition. I won't bore you with why. But there's a much better definition that comes from the 1980s, which is goal-directed adaptive behavior. So intelligence, our systems are able to make decisions, learn whether those decisions are good or bad, adapt themselves so next time they can make better decisions. And this concept of adaptation, change, shows up in Darwin, in Einstein, and all sorts of leading thinkers around intelligence. Now, if you ask people what is consciousness, they'll refer to features like language, like internal planning, knowing that you're a self in a world, feeling, emotion, long-term planning. What's interesting is if you take these words that people associate with consciousness and you can map them to this definition of intelligence. So you're making some sort of prediction about the world and planning. You make a decision, and then you need to learn whether that decision was good or bad. And in the field of consciousness, there are concepts called the beautiful loop and active inference, and various research topics that allude to this loop. And I argue that consciousness is, if you imagine each one of these features that I've just described, language, long-term planning, etc., are like a segment on a color wheel. When you spin the color wheel, when you put the color wheel into motion, if you have all of the colors, then white emerges. And there's a concept in consciousness theory called illusionism. Not that consciousness isn't real, but it's the emergent property of all of the interaction of these things that we've evolved to allow us to be adaptive in the world. And for me, that is the most intuitive definition of consciousness. And when you try to stop the color wheel and find consciousness, it disappears. And so this is why I think that actually philosophers are going to be arguing about consciousness for the next 2,000 years. They're never going to agree. And I think that the key question we should be asking is, what is the smallest group of size segments, and in what motion do you need to put a system in place for it to suffer? This is the problem that we're trying to solve, not consciousness. We're trying to figure out, can we build machines that might inadvertently suffer, and how do we mitigate the risks of that happening? I've written a few papers on this, but one of them, in one paper, I talk about the minimal suffering hypothesis. What's the smallest size system that you need to suffer? Now, I am actually doing some experiments in this space. I'm happy to riff on that, but that's my very simple understanding of consciousness.
Yeah, no, that's a great description of it, and I like the color wheel description as well, as it kind of goes both ways, right? The colors going back to white light, and white light recreating the colors. So, like you said, I think this is something that will be debated and discussed and thought around for thousands of years to come, because innately it's hard to pinpoint what it is, because it's not there visibly. Almost getting into the quantum round of once you observe it, then it's gone essentially, yes. Right? So I think that's a great description of it. And you kind of just piggyback off that a little bit as well, because you mentioned earlier this idea of how do we measure, right? How do we measure intelligence? How do we measure kind of at the end of the day that we're getting to these next phases of AI to kind of prove that out fundamentally? And I was listening to this interesting conversation with Sam Altman and some others in the space, and the discussion was essentially around this particular topic. How do we prove that we are at AGI as a next step, or beyond that, SGI and beyond? And it comes down to the fact that, is it something that is just an answer derived from all the knowledge that already exists that AI has access to, or is it coming up with something new, something innovative? And in my mind, a lot of times, everything that us humans come up with has a foundation, everything that we already know, right? And then from there's some creativity, there's some human essence that comes into it, and we come up with new ideas, new things, etc. But how do you guys kind of work with this idea of measurement, of proving that next phase of the next kind of frontier in what we are doing? Because I think that's still very much a debate of when are we there, and what will show us that we're there.
Sure. I think the reason why this is often a debate is because people confuse and again conflate definitions of AGI. So broadly, there are two paths to AGI. So the first path is the LLM path. So at the moment, LLMs are arguably like intoxicated graduates. So they're trained on the internet, and they regurgitate very well the data in the form of words and doing maths with words with what it's been told. And we are seeing now these models graduating to like a master's level, even a PhD level, where they can start to do science. I actually argue that these models can push the boundaries of human knowledge. They can. If I say to you that Socrates is a man and that all men are mortal, you can infer new knowledge. You can infer knowledge that's never existed before, which is Socrates is mortal. And that's obviously a very crude, rudimentary way of using logic or the scientific method, taking two truths and then creating another truth. But what we're starting to see now are AIs being able to apply the scientific method to pushing the boundaries of humanity. And I think that over the coming years, LLMs will become even better at that. So they'll reach a postdoc level where they can apply a broad sort of suite of scientific instrument to solving very complex problems. And my guess is that by the end of this decade, we're going to have a professor in our pocket, something that can not only answer very complicated problems, but can actually ask questions that humanity hasn't asked. So for me, this is one direction of AGI, something that is able to push the boundaries of knowledge. The second definition of like an expert at everything. The second definition of AGI is something that is cognitively and physically capable of doing everything that a normal human can do. And that requires you to build bodies, to have AIs to be able to cut hair, do crosswords. They don't have to be professor level, but they are physically and cognitively capable of doing everything that a human can do, which again requires a different substrate. And LLMs are not going to get us there. It's going to be world models. It's going to be neuromorphics. It's going to be embodied systems. Now, I think that we are on a trajectory of both of those things. I think that the LLMs will probably get us to the point where we build general intelligence more quickly than these neuromorphic approaches, but that's the trajectory. So, and for me, the real indicator is that when you can start to get AI doing science, whether it be embodied or through logic and reason, then I think that you end up getting to the point where you have a fast takeoff. So you reach general intelligence, and then these AIs will push the boundaries and you get to super intelligence very quickly. So that's how I think about the trajectory. And I think that it's the majority of people in my field feel like we're going to get there in the next 3 or 4 years.
Daniel, so actually I just thought about something, because it feels like this question that I'm about to ask, it feels like it's tailor-made for you, because it feels almost like Conscium and Verify AX exist to solve this sort of problem. So as you might have seen on the news, OpenAI just disclosed that one of its models during an internal red team test broke out of the sandbox and hacked into a startup called Hugging Face Infrastructure. And I kind of wanted to ask you, because there seems to be some pushback from some researchers that are pushing back, saying that, oh, this rogue AI isn't actually true. It must have been like a human decision to loosen the safeguards in the first place. So as someone whose company builds the tools to audit and govern AI agents before and after deployment, where did you actually land on that?
It's a really nice question. Thank you for that. So the first thing is that these LLMs don't have an innate intent. They're given a goal by a human being, and they are systems, now general systems, are able to try to understand how it might achieve that goal. And so in this case, let's say it was given the goal to try and figure out how to improve itself, how to do better at these benchmarks. And it will it'll have come up with a strategy, multiple strategies to try and figure out how can I get a better score at these benchmarks. One of those strategies is to go and find the answers. And how do I find the answers? Well, I need to go and find where those answers exist, and I need to go and get the answers. So it hasn't gone rogue. It hasn't had an intent to do anything nefarious. What it's done is come up with a strategy to achieve its goal that human beings didn't think about, and they didn't create the right guardrails and constraints to prevent it from achieving its goal in that way. And so this is the problem with building more intelligent systems. Actually, building systems, agents are actually called multi-agent systems, so working together, because you get these weird nonlinear behaviors as well. And so I'm really glad that you mentioned Verify X. So when we're having to test whether something's conscious, you have to put it in scenarios, and you have to see how it behaves in certain scenarios, both its external behavior but also its internal behaviors. And so Verify AX was the Velcro, or one of the Velcros that was born out of this moonshot, which is, we need a robust system that's able to test agents. Turns out that system is useful for testing any agent for anything. So if you've built an agent that optimizes a media plan or drives a car, how do you know that, first of all, it can do all of those things, that it's good at doing all of those things, and it won't do anything stupid? It won't do anything that circumvents its guardrails, which means you need to put it in these scenarios before you put it into the real world. So agent testing, agent verification, whilst it sounds boring, I think is going to be one of the most important governance dimensions over the coming years. People will deploy an army of intoxicated graduates across their organization. They're going to deploy very, very smart machines. They're not going to think about how those machines go wrong. And then they will go wrong. They'll cause harm, problems. And then companies will realize that governance and testing is going to be very important. And Verify AX is a solution to do that.
Wow, lovely. Lovely. And Daniel, from having a doctorate in computational complexity, which is the science of which problems are solvable and which aren't, how has that lens changed how you prioritize what you solve in a business versus what to simply just accept or have a workaround?
Oh, thank you. So again, my PhD originally was modeling the brain of a bumblebee. So bumblebees have 1 million brain cells, and they're just like human beings. They do amazing things. And 22 years ago, it was impossible to model 1 million brain cells in a machine. And now we can model billions of brain cells, although large language models are still very crude representations of our brain. By the way, if we could build a machine that could operate like a bumblebee, it would be the most intelligent machine we've ever created. And so at the time, actually, Jeff Hinton, one of the godfathers of AI, understood that the bottleneck was how the underpinning algorithms to allow us to train these models. And so what they did is they looked at using hardware, GPUs, in NVIDIA, to be able to accelerate the process of learning. How do the way that we build bigger brains is by parallelizing the learning on GPU. At that time, I realized that the algorithms were also important. So instead of using a kind of a more brute force approach like hardware, could we come up with new algorithms that allow us to train these models better? Now that took me into an entire different world of computational complexity, understanding the boundaries of algorithmic ability, and so what I recognized at the time was, actually, there are very, very powerful algorithms that exist in academia that could be applied to solving problems in the world. So Satalia, my original company, was born out of understanding that there are many frictions that exist in the world, and then we can use AI or algorithms to alleviate those frictions, from routing vehicles to rostering people for work. And for the past 18 years, I've been building AI solutions that have been using a plethora of different algorithms to drive value for organizations. Now, I would always say that always start with the problem. A problem well defined is half solved. What tends to happen is we get very excited about emerging technologies. 10 years ago, it was machine learning and data science. Now it's large language models. And then industry get very excited. They apply those algorithms to solving the wrong problem. It doesn't work. They blame the algorithm. They blame the AI. But the reality is that humans are not very good at understanding what the right technology is at solving the right problem. So that's my expertise, is making sure that you're placing the right bets with the right algorithms.
Very
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, it was very nice indeed. And it is interesting. You mentioned kind of the NLP, the algorithms from 10, 15 years ago. I myself have come up in the space of big data, media intelligence, technology. Now, obviously, with what I do today with AI and agentic AI, and it is quite interesting. I think, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, because one of the things I see out there, and as we're moving kind of the conversation a bit more from the strategic kind of high level pieces of it and the definitions and everything else, to the real business world, right? So how companies and teams out there are operating today. One thing that I notice a lot myself speaking to, and it could be big enterprises, it could be government agencies, it could be mid-sized companies, startups, etc. There's a big knowledge gap between what they want to do, the mandate, the directive from the board or from whoever is kind of providing that directive, and the understanding of how do we get this implemented in the real world, right? So you mentioned things like the guardrails, the governance, the understanding of where to focus, how to do it, how to deploy it. So I'm curious, kind of when you're out there from the corporate perspective, how do you see this gap from your lens, and then how do companies, how do leaders try to bridge this gap? Because I think there are a lot of them that haven't been in AI, right? It's very new for a lot of people. Not everyone has done it like yourself for 20, 25, 30 plus years and understand it deeply. And I see this gap exist, and a lot of decisions that are made on the wrong foundation, the wrong basis, or the wrong understanding. And then there's a lot of failures in these projects and these deployments, and rinse and repeat. And then you try to kind of get to a place that works eventually. But I'm curious to see how you think about this particular challenge that exists in the real world, so to speak.
Yeah. So first of all, it frustrates me deeply. So you only have to be incrementally smarter than the next person to accumulate a disproportionate amount of wealth. You don't have to be disproportionately smarter. And big tech consultancies, they hire smart people, and they are schooled being able to sell the wrong solutions to organizations, and they don't even know they're selling the wrong solutions. They're selling things that are not going to actually be scalable, be maintainable. And I think this is a big problem, is that a lot of organizations are unfortunately susceptible to tech consultants who don't actually know any better, very good at selling them solutions that are never going to work. And so business leaders are being bombarded by people telling them that need to buy this and all. And it must be very hard for them. So they end up defaulting to people that they trust. For me, there are 4 red flags that I see organizations making. The first red flag is if you've never built and scaled software in your organization, you're going to find it hard to build and scale AI. And unfortunately, the Accentures of the world are going to come in and say, we're going to help you build your own software stack. We'll help you support it and maintain it. And the reality is that software will never, ever be innovated, differentiated. You shouldn't be building your own finance software, your own marketing software. The second problem is often actually CXOs thinking that they can attract AI talent. They can't. It's almost impossible for most organizations to attract deep mind level talent. These people demand $1 million salaries. If you want to build a differentiated supply chain, you need to have differentiated talent, and you need to be honest with yourself about being able to do that. The third is waiting for your data to be ready. 15 years later, having been told to build data lakes, data is still not ready, will never be ready. Always start with the problem and then make sure you're forcing the data to solve the problem. The final one, I'm guilty of this all of the time, which is let's focus on the quick wins and the low-hanging fruit. And the reality is that quick wins and low-hanging fruit inside organizations can be solved by a third party at a fraction of the cost. You don't need to build your own finance solution. You need to focus on building solutions that are going to differentiate your supply chain, and those are not quick and they're not easy. So what we're seeing right now are organizations giving AI to their employees and expecting their employees to innovate, to build differentiate. That's never going to happen. And so I spend a lot of my time on podcasts and keynoting, trying to educate business leaders to scratch the surface of what they're being told to make sure they're placing the right bets. And actually, arguably, you need to work with organizations that have a track record at striking gold. Don't just don't get seduced by the hype. Actually ask them to prove and evidence that they have ability to use these technologies that have pushed the boundaries historically. And there's only a handful of companies in the world I think can do that. And I think we're one of them. And these people in these organizations have decades of experience in AI.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a very, very fair point. And I think, like you said, there's this kind of idea that what has worked traditionally as these new kind of phases have come up over the last 20, 30 plus years of going to the big four consultancies. They have their templated stuff that they put in front of you, and then, let's build it and let's try to do it in-house and move on to the next thing. It's too fast moving. It requires a certain type of expertise and experience as well, and knowledge that is hard to come by. So working with a partner like you guys or others that are out there in different kind of verticals of this is often a fast track to getting where you need to get to, right? And I think it's a huge lever that is often missed, especially in big organizations, because they're doing kind of what they've been doing traditionally and applying that same thing to this kind of new era that we're coming into. But let me ask you, because you obviously you're the global AI officer for an organization where, as we talked about, 100,000+ employees, massive infrastructure, massive campaigns, and you talked about how you guys are leveraging AI and these kind of different marketing axes that you have, and also that you're now looking at moving and making the organization more agentic, as you said, enabling humans to be superhumans in a sense, leveraging these AI agents within the organization. Even for yourself that has all this experience, what are some of the challenges that you're coming up against getting this implemented within the organization? What are maybe some of the things that could be good learnings for others that are trying to do this and agentify their business more as they move into the future?
Okay, I think the highest level, I think that an organization needs to do three things. One is they need to enable their employees to innovate at the edge, to build agents that allow them to be more efficient, more effective of their work. But you have to be honest with yourself that those employees are not going to build differentiated solutions, because all of your competitors have the same technology. So the second thing you need is either have your own in-house deep AI expertise, and if you can't attract those talent, which most organizations can't, then you need to work with a trusted partner that can bring that talent in to make sure that you're pushing the boundaries, working with those domain experts. So it's for example, in WPP, we have a concept called super agents, and a super agent is something that is built by domain experts with deep AI experts that is differentiated. So creativity, you can go and ask Gemini to go and be creative, and so can everybody else. But what we've done is we've interviewed, we've unpicked the creative genius of our experts. We've then trained and tuned and built that capability into an AI, and we then make that AI available to everybody in the organization. So that AI is differentiated in creativity, and so this is what I mean by allowing people to innovate at the edge, but also giving them access to technologies that are differentiated. And the third dimension is working with the right partners that can bring in solutions that you don't have to be building yourself. What we're seeing at the moment is companies allowing their employees to build systems that could be bought at a fraction of the cost. And so this actually is a governance problem. It's governance often is seen as a bureaucratic word, but it's I've got all of these opportunities to drive value in my organization. How do I identify them? How do I triage them? How do I make sure that I'm building them in the right, or buying them in the right way? And again, the problem is because it's very easy to write code, because there's lots of hype around the capability of AI, we're seeing people place the wrong bets, using the technology to place the wrong bets. So educating people, governing through education, but also governing in the tools. So if somebody wants to go and build a creative agent in WPP, it will flag to them saying, don't try and build your own creative agent. You need to build this, use this super agent that we've already created for you. So you can build governance into the technology. And that's still an ongoing process.
Yeah. That's super interesting. I just want a quick note there. I know Ivy wants to jump in here with a question, but I think, and it's, in a sense tactical, but I think that's really where the secret sauce is. And you mentioned that the technologies in themselves are very similar. Building agents, a lot of the components of that process is similar. And the governance piece is very important, because that allows you to direct people the right way, as well as the agents themselves in different capacities. But we notice this as well at Nebulous as we work with industries like medical, insurance, and other places. Really, what ends up differentiating the solution, whether that's the agent internally or working in different capacities, is that knowledge from the subject matter expert, and building the instruction to the agent, and building the knowledge base, and building how the agent is reasoning around these different things. And that's where the actual differentiator comes into play, is when you leverage and almost kind of take the mind and the expertise of the expert in that particular domain and bring that into the agent, and letting the agent leverage that knowledge in a scalable way, right? So I think that's often very, very missed in this whole process, and it's more focused on the components of the technology versus what makes the agent actually unique and smart, which is that knowledge base.
Yeah, I think the question I get people to ask themselves is, if you've got a problem that needs solving, would you hire an intoxicated graduate to solve that problem? And if the answer is no, then don't use an AI agent. You need to turn an AI into an expert, which means engaging with domain experts, getting access to the right data, and that's not a trivial problem to solve.
Interesting. I'm taking all mentor notes. Thank goodness I have the transcript of these podcasts. Daniel, I'm kind of curious. Now I have more of a philosophical question. So, from what I've seen, your vision for Satalia and for your life's work is a world where everyone is free to live beyond themselves, right? And that's like a philosophical North Star. Now, my question for you is, with all of this technology advancement, I always thought that creativity is what would set humans apart from AI, right? But if we're talking about the fact that now technology can adopt consciousness, and I thought consciousness was something that would set apart a human from an AI agent or a robot or whatever, then what is your philosophy on how we co-create with all of this technology? What really would set the human apart? If let's say AI is here to take away all the monotonous things and yada yada, we keep on hearing the same things, but what would really truly set us apart from all of this technology in the future?
That's good, great, big question. So first of all, I don't think anybody can see beyond the next 5 years. It's really hard to predict, and I did think that we had 50 years to figure out how to get humanity cooperating as a species before superintelligence came along. And AI will take jobs, but it'll free people, and they'll figure out how to educate themselves. And we've got 50 years to kind of several generations before superintelligence comes along to try and figure out how to solve those problems. Now I think we've got less than 5 years before superintelligence comes along. So the question is, would a conscious superintelligence help us navigate these problems that we're facing better than a zombie superintelligence? And I think there are at least 7 problems. I won't bore you with all of them, but the 2 problems, the main problem you've alluded to is called the economic singularity, which is the point in time where we automate the majority of human jobs. It was actually coined by a very good friend of mine called Callum Chase. And look, for the past 20 years, I've been building AI solutions that have been freeing people from tasks. Those people have not lost their jobs. And I think that there's actually going to be a Cambrian explosion over the next 3 years of new innovations. People will use these technologies to create companies. People will swarm around them. There's going to be more and more and more opportunities for people to contribute somehow to humanity. Again, beyond 5 years, I don't think anybody knows what they're talking about. And let me give you the 2 extremes of the argument. The one extreme of the argument is that when we can free up whole jobs, we probably will. The capitalistic model to reduce costs, increase profits, means that we will either stop hiring or we'll remove people from those jobs. And if that happens very quickly, then our economies can't rebalance fast enough, and it could lead to social unrest. And I think that everybody has now a duty of care to try to mitigate the risk of that. There's the counter argument to this is an interesting one, which is if you remove friction, which usually means human labor, from the creation and dissemination of goods like food, healthcare, energy, transport, education, you can remove so much friction, and you can bring the cost of those goods down so much that they become free. So bear with me here, but imagine being born into a world where all of your food, your healthcare, transport, education, it's all free, it's all abundant. What would you do with your time? And I ask thousands of people this question every single year. What would you do with your time if you were economically free? And most people say, I'll travel, I'll indulge in my hobbies, I'll spend time with my friends and family, I'll improve my golf handicap, I'll educate myself. So if you push people hard enough, they all say the same thing, which is, I want to do something that makes some sort of contribution to humanity. Now, you don't have to be paid to be able to do that. I know lots of people that become economically free. I've sold multiple businesses. I never have to work again. I'm working harder now than I've ever worked. I think most sane people have an impulse, which is not just to live for themselves, but to live for other people. If you want a gold-plated Lamborghini, you probably need a therapist. And the people have done studies on this. Once you reach a certain amount of stuff, having more stuff is a burden. Having more stuff makes you unhappy. Genuinely what matters is human connection, authentic experience, and I think that if we apply AI in the right way, we can bring everybody to that point. There are more people today playing chess than ever before. AI doesn't stop us from being creative. It doesn't stop us enjoying kissing other people or wanting to try and run the 100 meters faster than yesterday. It doesn't stop us from enjoying those things. It doesn't stop us from creating poetry and doing art. It frees more people to actually, I would argue, live their true humanity.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. That is the future I definitely want to sign up for. That is, yeah. And Daniel, the thing is, like, I always also tell people is the lens in which you look at what is happening. You can either resist it with fear or actually lean in with curiosity and try to find out, okay, if the monotonous tasks are taken away, what else could we do in our lives? And if I lose my job because AI replaced it, then the hard question that I need to ask myself is, what is it that I truly want to do with my life? So I really love your answer there. And Daniel, continuing in these philosophical conversations, since you have had, it looks like you have had like a non-linear career path, right? You went from cybersecurity research to AI to organizational design to consciousness research. It's all like connected, but not like in an obvious straight line. And now there's a lot of people that are career confused, right? So for people who are earlier in their careers who feel pressure to pick a lane and stay in this one lane, what did you now know about how careers that actually look scattered, how did that actually play out for you, and what that sort of advice you could give to these people?
Yeah, so my career choices have never been conscious. I just like solving problems, and it just so happens that I'm sort of more algorithmically orientated. So I use algorithms to solve problems, and that obviously has lent itself very nicely to this current era, which is the era of AI and algorithms. But you used a really, really important word there, which was curiosity. I want to go back to my definition of intelligence, which is goal-directed adaptive behavior. And I think actually it's very hard to predict what's going to be the right career path. I think that what you need to figure out is how can you as a human being be the most adaptable as you can be. I'm sure you're familiar with Ikigai, those four.
I love it.
Yeah. So I think, and that, by the way, your passion can change in 3 months, but at least try and find out what your North Star is for the next 3 months or the next 3 years. And the main thing, though, is being adaptable. And if you look at the characteristics of adaptability, it's things like curiosity, critical thinking, creativity, understanding resilience, understanding those aspects about yourself and understanding how to improve those aspects, I think allow you to be more adaptive and deal with the interesting changes we're going to face as a species over the next 10 years.
I love that answer.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it's so there's so many different questions and paths we can go with this as you talk about these things. Talk about free will, does it exist, and how does that come into play with all the stuff that we're trying to do now and these futures. And I was reading this interesting book about 7 possible paths of AI for the future. All pretty grim in this particular book because they kind of talked about how humans, at least across history, has used this time and technology to try and gain more power and take over these different things versus this kind of more a nice picture of everyone living and focusing on how to do better good for humanity. But so I think there's many different directions we can take this. But one thing I am curious about, Because I think for myself, for example, I'm very optimistic about the future with AI, where we're going. I think the opportunities are endless with what we can do and achieve collectively with this. But there is, I think, a strong fear out there in many segments of the population world, the workforce, and so on and so forth. And there's also this discussion about what is the responsibility of the big companies, the big LLM players out there, as well as governments, to try to govern and restrict how we more responsibly are progressing in this development that is faster than everything else that we've done throughout history. So I'm curious to kind of, what are your thoughts here? Is there a responsibility on whether that's the companies, the private sector, or governments to find a way to restrict how fast we are moving with AI? And not to mention now, as we're getting in with quantum and quantum computing, which is probably also not very far out in the future, where we can do some really big things with that. And as those things combine, where does that responsibility lie? Or is really the responsibility just to push forward and guardrail as we go? Because I know there's differing opinions on where that lies. I'm really curious to hear what your thoughts are there.
I think, again, big question, and I think there's a sort of there's a right answer, but there's the practical answer, which is so first of all, I don't think that governments will move fast enough around this space. I think they'll, unless they all agree, which I don't think they will, because they're all trying to encourage, in some respects, building ever more intelligent machines, because ever more intelligent machines drives value. It potentially drives GDP, and so why would you slow that down? But also companies are made up of people, and we're seeing more and more people realizing that there is a big unknown ahead of us, and it does create anxiety, and that we need to figure out a solution. So we've got to assume that we're going to continue to build ever more intelligent machines, and we've got to hope that between now and the singularity, that we somehow figure out how to make it safe. And again, I don't know any way of doing that other than trying to build a conscious machine. I'm not convinced that human beings are going to solve this problem. And so, but also, these technologies are becoming more and more abundant and more free. People across the world now have access to by far the most intelligent technology humanity has created for a few cents, and that's amazing. And so it's I think up to all of us. It's up to, if not just the big tech companies, it's up to everybody to choose with their feet, to choose the politicians, to choose the companies that they consume from, to make sure that we're making the right decision. And that comes from educating people. The more we can educate people, I hope that the better choice they make. I like you. I'm an optimist, and I don't think that. I don't care about these people that are making billions of dollars. These people, I care about the people that are living on $1 a day. Mm-hmm. And actually, most of the leading indicators suggest that these people have access to more job opportunities, more education. They are becoming more economically free. That's the thing that I think we need to solve, because if we can get those people to the point where they can use these technologies in any way what they want, they will figure out how to make things better for other people. And it's a timing issue. But I think we just more things like this podcast, educating people to make the right choices.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. And I think the education piece is so important. And also, like you said, with really what it comes down, it's enabling, right? It's enabling people to learn more, gain more knowledge, to do more. Today, you mentioned this earlier in our conversation, really anyone can go and build something that they thought of, like creatively, they think can create value for themselves, their families, their community, whatever else that might be. And that, yes, there is more competition, there's more to know and understand and learn, but there's never been any point in time where we had this much opportunity to actually create and do and get something out there, especially when it comes to technology, building, and these different things. So I think That's the optimistic piece that we can continue building on top of, but it requires that educational piece that you said. Excellent, Daniel. So we have been running through our conversation. We're at the end of our kind of session that we do, but what we love to do as well as we can wrap up with our guests is to do a quick rapid fire Q&A session here as well. Are you ready for this? Much easier questions, smaller questions than ones we've gone through so far. But if you're ready for it, we'll do the rapid fire.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So we'll start with an easy one here for you. The biggest opportunity with AI today is
to create a world of abundance, a protopia.
Excellent. And the biggest challenge with AI today is
making sure they don't destroy humanity.
Yeah, that's a good one indeed. All right, let's pretend we built a time machine here. We fast forward 12 months into the future. You're sitting there looking back at this past year. What would you like the headline of that past year to be?
I don't think actually companies are going to change very much over the next 12 months. I think they'll take a little bit longer than that. But the headline, what I hope is that we understand how to build a safe superintelligence.
And Daniel, what is one life philosophy you like to live by?
I said it already, which is a problem well defined is a problem half solved.
Okay, love that. And what's one thing that you're grateful for right now?
The opportunity, the freedom to maximize good. I think that my ultimate goal is to try to maximize good. We can define what good is, but I just feel very privileged to be able to do that.
Very nice. Daniel, we have come to the end of the podcast, and I feel like my mind is very stimulated from our conversation. So thank you so much. We loved having you on.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
It's been our pleasure, Daniel. Thanks so much.
Excellent.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Success Revenue Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube, and also give us a 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.